Today, lesson 61B, simple interest. This happens to be the official last lesson of this unit, this whole idea of ratios and proportional relationships and so on. We will have a test coming up in 2 days. 2 days. Okay? Tomorrow, review for the test, and then the next day, the test. And our focus today is on simple interest. So let's get started. If someone borrows money from a bank, what factors influence how much is paid back? And there are really two different ways of dealing with interest in real life. You deal with interest if you borrow money from a bank, or you have a credit card, or things like that. Or the flip of that is if you deposit money in an account, like a savings account or other types of accounts, you earn interest. But both sort of work the same way. So that's why in parentheses right there it says, the same is true for depositing money in an account and then earning interest. What factors influence how much money you earn? Well, the factors are the same, and they are the principal, which is how much money you borrowed or deposited, the amount of time that it happens, and it's typically notated in years, how long it was borrowed for, and then the interest rate, what interest was charged, and that's an annual interest rate. And when we're talking about simple interest, which is what our focus is today, simple interest is money paid only on the principal. Only on the principal. Okay? So let's start with number one. And we're going to take a look at these at the beginning of this lesson the same way that we've taken a look at lots and lots of different percent problems. Joe borrows $200 from the bank at 6% simple interest for 3 years. How much interest does he owe? Well, we're going to take a look at this from the perspective of percent over 100 equals the part over the whole, or the amount of change over the original amount, which was the way we thought of percent of change. And when we're talking about amount of change, we're talking about the amount of money that they earn for interest, which is a very small amount. And the original amount is the principal. Now, when we do this, we're doing this to find the amount of interest earned for 1 year. That's why in blue right there it says for 1 year. So the percent that we know within this problem is 6. We're trying to find the amount of change, or we're trying to find the amount of interest that he earned. And $200 is the amount of money that he put in the bank account, or the principal, or the original amount. Okay? So when we solve this, of course, we should multiply both sides by 200, since this is a one-step algebraic equation. And we would get 12. And so that is the amount of interest he earned for 1 year. $12. But he invested the money for 3 years. So if it's $12 for 1 year, for 3 years, of course, it would be 12 times 3, or $36. And I guess I kept saying investing. He actually is borrowing money here, not investing money. They both work the same way, but the amount of interest that he owes is $36. $12 per year. And you could kind of think of that as the unit rate, if you wanted to. So that's the first part of the question. How much interest does he owe? He owes $36. Then the second part is, how much total does he owe now? Well, he borrowed $200. He has to pay back the $200 plus the $36 worth of interest. So the total money owed is $236. And so much like the last two lessons, we have to pay attention to what's being asked. Okay? Are we being asked how much interest he's paid or owes? And then also, are we being asked on top of that how much money he owes total, or how much money you have total? Okay? So we have to pay attention to that. All right, everybody try number 2. Juan invests $5,000 in bonds. In the first money, somebody was borrowing money. In the second problem, somebody's investing money. But the idea works the same with simple interest. Juan invests $5,000 in bonds for 6 years at an annual interest rate of 7%. The first part is how much interest did he earn? Figure that out, please. So we've already stated what the problem says. The first part is how much interest did he earn? Well, we know the percent is 7. We know the original amount, which is the principal in this type of problem, is $5,000. We're trying to figure out how much interest he earned. So that's a one-step equation. Multiply both sides by 5,000. I always try and do some cross-dividing just to sort of make the numbers smaller like that. And so then it's clear that he earns $350 per year, or in 1 year. So that, if we want to think of it that way, that's the unit rate. That's what he's earning, $350 per year. But he invested it for 6 years, not 1 year. So we would need to multiply 350 times the 6 years. And that's $2,100 worth of interest that he earned for the 6 years if he originally invested $5,000 at 7% interest. Then the second part is how much is the bond worth now? Well, he originally put in $5,000 plus the $2,100 that he just earned in interest. So he now has $7,100. Started with 5, he now has $7,100 in that bond. Okay? All right, I would like you to work on number 3 and number 4 with your shoulder partner. Talk about how you're going to go about trying to solve them, then what you get, and then do the same thing for number 4. I'll get back to you in 3 or 4 minutes. Number 3, Grace borrowed $3,500 to be repaid after 5 years at an annual simple interest rate of 8%. How much interest will she be paying? And number 1 and number 2, we were asked for 2 different things. One thing led to another. In this one, we are only asked for how much interest she will be paying based on the information within that problem. So the setup is exactly the same, though. We know the percent. We know the original amount, the principal, which is $3,500. So we have a one-step equation. I'm going to multiply both sides by 3,500. I'll be doing some cross-dividing here to make the mathematics part of the problem a little bit easier. And that would give us $280 worth of interest for 1 year. But we're asked for 5 years, so multiply that by 5 and we get $1,400 worth of interest. We are not asked how much she has to pay back altogether. If you were, it would be the $3,500, the sum of $3,500 and $1,400. Number 4, Paige deposited $1,500 in a savings account. How much will she have in the account after 3 years at an annual interest rate of 4%, assuming she does not make any more deposits or withdrawals? And I realize the part in blue is not in your notes. I added that to the keynote here. So, set up our proportional relationship and solve, and we get $60 for 1 year, but it's asked for 3 years. So that means the total interest for 3 years, the amount of interest earned would be $180. But it says how much will she have in the account. So we're not finished yet. She has the $1,500 that she originally put in the account, plus the $180 worth of interest. So she now has $1,680 in the account. So when I said earlier something about reading what you're being asked to find, this is what I'm talking about. Are you only asked for the amount of interest, or are you asked now for the total amount in the account or the total amount owed? Okay? All right, next problem. From earlier, the factors that influence interest paid or earned are principal, time, and rates. Simple interest, once again, is money paid only on the principal. But let me now introduce a new type of problem. Jalen borrows $500 from the bank at 3% simple interest. So far, it's the same. Here is where it's different. And pays $90 worth of interest. For how many years did she borrow? Now we've got a slight problem. The idea of the proportional relationship doesn't work nicely for us because we now have everything involved within this problem. We're not just finding the amount of interest. We're given the amount of interest, and we have to figure out how many years that's going to take. Well, there is a formula that puts everything together with regards to simple interest, and that is, and this is where you should be filling things in, simple interest is equal to the principal times the rates times the time. And it's put together in a nice little formula with the beginning of each word, the first letter of each word. I equals P times R times T. Interest equals principal times rate times time. Now, we could have used this for the first 4 problems, okay? And let me just show you. I guess actually I want to solve this problem first. In this problem, I is 90. And you probably should be writing this down. The principal is $500. The interest is, as a decimal value, is 0.03. Now, we could put 3 over 100 right there if we wanted to, but in a setup like this, it's a lot easier to deal with the decimal value of that 3%. And it's the time that we're trying to find. So in some respects, this looks a little bit like some of those multi-percent problems that we've been working on. So we would need to multiply 500 times 0.03, and that's 15. And now, of course, we have a one-step equation. Divide both sides by 15, and we get 6 years. So the time, based on that information, is 6 years. Now, and I thought that that was before this, but we could have used this formula in all the other problems as well. But I wanted to show you that all of those other problems were really proportional relationships, which is what we've been dealing with this entire time. So from an earlier problem, and I think this is number 4, the one where Paige deposited $1,500, we could have used this formula. Watch. It's the amount of interest that we're trying to find. The principal we know is $1,500. The interest rate is 4% in this problem. The amount of time is 3. And so if I multiplied all of those values together, I get $180 for the interest. And that's the total interest for all 3 years. So it would give it to us all at once there, okay? And then if we were asked to find how much he had in the account, we, of course, would have to add that on. All right. Any questions about this simple interest formula? All right. I would like everybody to try number 5. Ben deposited $1,940 in a savings account at a yearly interest rate of 2%. He earned $310.40 in simple interest. How long did he have the money in the account? And once again, we are assuming he does not make any more deposits or withdrawals. That part in blue is not in your notes. Most common mistake in these type of problems is not using the correct value for the interest rate. It's 2%, so you either need to use 2 over 100 or 0.02, not 2, because that's not going to work out for you. 2% as a numeric value is 2 100ths, okay? All right, so the amount of interest that was earned is $310.40. Now, I want to bring up something because there could be a situation where it said the amount of money that Ben has in his account right now is, I'll just throw this out there, $2,200. So if it said that, you would have to figure out how much simple interest was earned, which would be the total amount in the account minus the principal. So you have to think about that, okay? But in this problem, the principal is $1,940. The interest rate as a numeric value is 0.02, and it is the time we're trying to find. So we need to multiply correctly 1,940 times 0.02 first, and that is 38.8. So now we have this one-step algebraic equation. We divide both sides by 38.8. And 310.4 divided by 38.8 is 8. And so the amount of time that the money was in the account was 8 years. Okay? All right. Do number 5 and number 6 with your shoulder partner. Talk your way through it. Compare answers and so on. I'll get back to you in about 3 or 4 minutes. Yes, we should be doing 6 and 7, not 5 and 6. We already did number 5. So 6 and 7. Number 6, Madison paid $2,910 worth of interest on her credit card during a 2-year period. The principal amount she originally paid was $9,700. Now remember, there's a chance where you may have to find the amount of interest rather than being given the amount of interest. Okay? If the credit card charges simple interest, what was the interest rate that she paid? So we know the amount of interest. If you're not given that, you may have to find it by taking the total amount and subtracting the principal. Okay? The principal in this problem is $9,700. It is the rate that we're trying to find, and the amount of time is 2 years. So we would multiply $9,700 times 2, divide both sides by $19,400. I, of course, would at least in this fraction right here, I would at the very minimum divide top and bottom by 10 to make the numbers a little smaller. I think that's where some of you are getting stuck. But regardless, you should end up with a 15% interest rate. 15%. And number 7. John paid $1,184 worth of interest on his credit card during a 2-year period. If the interest paid is simple interest and at a rate of 16%, what was the principal amount he originally put on his credit card? Once again, we're assuming he didn't put any more items on the card. The amount of interest is $1,184. It is the principal that we're trying to find. The interest rate as a decimal value is 0.16. The amount of time is 2 years. 0.16 times 2 is 0.32. Divide both sides by 0.32. And 1,184 divided by 0.32 is $3,700. So $3,700 was the principal amount, or the original amount, that he put on his credit card. Okay? Any questions? All right.